Hey guys, so it's midsummer in the garden and the pests are at their maximum population, but the majority of my vegetables and ornamentals have very minimal problems. I use a very special formula involving baking soda and a few other items that have kept the garden pest-free this year. So very little pest damage, and I don't have to worry about my fruits and vegetables becoming victims of those same pests. So let's head into the greenhouse and I'll show you how to put this together, and it'll make a huge difference in your garden. So guys, this first recipe I'm going to put together is just an overall general pesticide spray that you're going to use in the garden. And this is safe on your ornamentals and your vegetables, fruit trees, anything that you have growing that you're going to be eating. This is good for aphids, mealybugs, whitefly, all sorts of problems that you're going to have in your garden that are very common this time of year. So let's get started on the first recipe. There's going to be 4 other recipes, but this one is what I think is one of the best because it just an overall spray. But if you want to target specific pests, you might look at one of the other 4 recipes. So we're using slightly warm water in this, so it doesn't matter if it's filtered or non-filtered, so make sure if you are getting it from the tap, it's not hot, but it's just slightly warm. The first ingredient is our all-purpose baking soda, not baking powder, and we're going to use 1 tablespoon baking soda. Next, we're going to use 2 tablespoons of cold pressed neem oil. Now, often you need to make sure you check the label, but this is cold pressed neem oil. That makes a big difference. So we're going to use 2 tablespoons of this. And speaking of neem oil, sometimes neem oils don't work on the adult insects as well as some of the smaller soft-bodied insects. So again, the cold press is a little bit more potent. You can get a lot of different types of neem oil, such as this neem oil concentrate or neem oil extract, but make sure you read the label and make sure it says that it is cold pressed. Now the next ingredient is something that's going to help this formula stick to the leaves and the plants and also act as a suffocation agent for the insect itself. So I would recommend pure Castile soap. It's one of the safest soaps you can use. It is made from plants. You can use, if you're using this on ornamentals, you can use something like 7th generation soap, and then as a last resort you could use Dawn. But just remember, some of these more industrial soaps are not going to be as safe on your vegetables as the Castile soap. So we're going to use 1 tablespoon of the Castile soap. Then we'll mix it all together and I'll do a quick demonstration of applying this on specific plants. Now, I always love using these paint stir sticks that I get at the hardware store because there's no charge for them in the paint department. So if you're buying something big or small at your local hardware store, always ask them for paint sticks. They come in so handy in the greenhouse and in your garden for such a reason. Also, these make excellent plant markers. You can write in magic marker on the outside of them and put it next to a plant so you have a plant label that will last all season. So one of the things you need to remember as you're using this recipe is you want to make sure you keep this agitated. I like using these solo sprayers. They're very compact and small. You can spray on the underside of leaves and up above like that. And it's really, for just less than $20, you get a great sprayer. And I've got, I think, 5 of these in the greenhouse now. So we're going to mix this up, head out to the garden, and just do a quick demo on some insects that I think might be on some eggplant. Now when you go to spray your plant, make sure you get the ground area and make sure that you spray on the underside of leaves, because during the daytime this is often where insects hide. So you want to spray to the point of runoff and then just do an overall misting spray just from above. And even around the edges of whatever container you're growing in, whether a raised bed or in-ground garden or even a small pot, you just want to make sure you get around the outside of that container as well, because sometimes the insect can be slowly making their way to your plant and hiding in some of those outer areas. Now, neem oil is an all-natural product, so you don't have to worry about it being a chemical. Again, cold pressed is the best way to go, and it is going to be the most potent. Sometimes adult insects are a little bit harder to kill with neem oil. That's why we're doing a combination of all 3 of these, but this will easily kill soft-bodied insects such as the hornworm and other smaller aphids and things like that, whiteflies. So again, neem oil, cold press, and you want to make sure that if your insect population is already very mature, you might double the amount of neem oil, but always do a spot test on every plant you're going to treat just on 1 leaf and see what happens within 24 hours. Now our second ingredient, the Castile soap, helps with adhesion to the leaves. So if you didn't have this, you might have a little bit quicker runoff with the neem oil. So the soap makes a huge difference. It also acts as a suffocation agent for the insects. So if you're spraying them directly, this will help kill them. You can almost use Castile soap alone without the other two. But again, the baking soda is a key ingredient in these recipes. I have seen recipes before that only have Castile soap, but I think they work better when you combine the three of these together, and you get a much better effect overall. And again, all three of them are extremely safe. So Castile soap will help quite a bit. Now again, baking soda is going to act as an irritant to the insects, especially soft body insects. It's going to repel insects away from your plants, and it's also going to be fatal if the insect ingests the baking soda. So these three together is my all-purpose insecticidal spray for my vegetable garden, where I'm going to be consuming edibles, and I want to make sure that I don't put anything on any of those plants that might be toxic. Now this next baking soda recipe is great for slugs, ants, beetles, and anything that might be crawling around the ground or getting close to your plants and eventually making it to your vegetables. This dry dust is going to act very quickly for those before mentioned pests, and it's really simple to put together. One of the key ingredients is diatomaceous earth. Now you have different types. You have food grade and you have the standard. This is just a standard bag, and it is labeled for insecticide, but for added safety, I'm using food grade diatomaceous earth because I'm going to be applying this to specific vegetables. Now this next baking soda recipe is a dry dust method. So you need to remember that if you're doing afternoon or morning, whatever, garden waterings, or if you have a lot of rain in your area, this may have to be applied right after a heavy rain or after you've watered. And I'm going to give you a close-up of the homemade methods I've used, the homemade dusters I've used, because those dusters you find at the store can be a little pricey. I can put a link to one in the description, but if you want to make your own, they're super simple. So this is a few examples of the current dusters I have. This one was a Parmesan cheese container. You can just flip it open and dust it. You have to be a little careful on coming out here. Now I had a screen in this one time. I haven't used it lately, but you can put a small window screen cut to size right on the inside, and then when you shake it, it doesn't come out quite so bad out of these holes. Also, this was a larger cheese holder here, and I've just taken a drill and drilled in there so that when I go around the plants, I can shake out my dust. This one also was a dollar store container, and I just drilled some holes so I can get a little bit faster treatment. They're a little bit larger holes, so depending on what size you need and how many plants you're treating, you can judge for yourself what type of container you need. But this one would be great for a full garden, and just if you're spot treating plants, something like this would work great. So this recipe again is the baking soda and the food grade diatomaceous earth. It's a 50-50 mix. I'm going to take 2 tablespoons of the food grade diatomaceous earth, and you can upsize this as large as you want it. You don't have to stick with just 2 and 2, but I'm just treating one plant today that I think I saw some small insects on. So we're taking 2 tablespoons of the baking soda, and you want to make sure that you mix it well. So put it back in its container, and before you use it, just make sure you kind of stir it up inside the container. Remember that if you are out on a windy day, you want to make sure that you don't breathe this because it can irritate your lungs and your sinuses. Not highly toxic. People use food grade earth. They actually consume this, but it's not to be inhaled. So that's just one of those things you do. So just shake it up there, and we'll head out to the garden, and I'll apply some of this to our eggplant that I think might have a few insects on it. So what we want to do is we want to specifically put this dust around the base of the plant because this is where some of our crawling insects are coming from. Also, we want to, for any flying insects that might bypass our dust on the ground, you can just do a light treatment on the leaves. And again, remember, do your best not to breathe this, and you can even apply it directly to your vegetables. It's not going to hurt them there. You want to be sure not to apply too much, because if you apply a heavy coating on this, it can reduce sunlight absorption. So remember to make sure you just do a light treatment on the leaves, and you can rinse this off once you think you've controlled your insect problems. Now, why this formula works so well is the baking soda and the diatomaceous earth kind of has the same effect. It dehydrates the soft-bodied insects. It can cut into their exoskeletons and really cause death rather quickly. So mixing these two together, diatomaceous works alone, but when you mix it with baking soda, you have a doubly effective and twice as potent recipe. Now this next recipe is targeting ants, small roaches, anything that might be around the garden. You can use this inside or outside your home. It's perfectly safe around pets. What you can do is you can take a mason jar like this. I've used this many times, punched holes in the top of it, and I've used it over and over and over. I don't have to worry so much about water getting to it or pets or anything else in the garden that might consume it. Not that they would harm them, but then your bait is gone quickly. So let me show you real quick how to put this together. Now with this mason jar, you can see I've punched holes in there, and I've done that with my hori hori knife. It's a Japanese garden knife. You just put it in the top, tap it a couple times, and you made small holes for ants to go in, and other insects that you're not targeting will stay out of here. Now if you're targeting something larger, of course you would make the holes a little bit bigger. Now this is a bait-based recipe, and so we're going to put in 1 tablespoon of granulated white sugar. We're going to put in 1 tablespoon of the baking soda, and the key to doing this is make sure you mix it properly. If it's not mixed properly, the ants may be able to consume the sugar without any kind of negative side effects. So just make sure you shake the ball around before you place it in the garden. Now when you do place it in the garden, don't place it upright like this, because if you have a quick rain come in, your entire bait will be saturated with water. It's best to put this at an angle, or maybe even tilt it down, so the ants can go in, the bait stays dry, and they go in and out and feed off this and ultimately take it back to the queen. Also, if you're targeting roaches, same rule applies. Any type of insect like that that feeds off of sweet baits, this is going to work great. Now if you're targeting ants specifically, ants have different feeding requirements at different times of the year. So if you don't feel like you don't see any ants going into the bait station or anything like that, you'll do this. Instead of using sugar, use bacon grease or any type of animal fat and mix it thoroughly with your baking soda, so they're getting a protein rather than a sugar. So again, ants may or may not take this depending on the time of year and their needs for their own colony. So you can switch back and forth from sugar to an animal fat to find out exactly what their feeding requirements are. Now occasionally some of my vegetables do have Japanese beetles, and actually some of my ornamentals such as crepe myrtles have the same problem. So Japanese beetles can be a huge problem in the garden, both in the edible garden and the ornamental garden. So we want to do this as a broad spray. You can use something like this, a very large backpack sprayer if you're spraying a large plant, or again back to the solo sprayers for treating small individual plants. So again, this will work on the Japanese beetle, and also it works very well on fleas and mosquitoes. It helps repel them, kill them, and drive them out of the garden. Now this broad spray, it requires 4 ingredients. One, we're going to go with our baking soda. We're going to go with 1 heaping tablespoon of baking soda. The Castile soap, we're going to use 2 tablespoons of Castile soap. And cayenne pepper, we're going to use a cayenne pepper powder. Get into this. And let's see, I probably should do this rather than spilling it everywhere. And be careful about breathing this, because this gets into your sinuses, you will deeply regret it. You're going to need 2 tablespoons of cayenne pepper powder, and then 2 tablespoons of granulated garlic. Now again, this is for 1 gallon size, so you can upsize it if you're using a large sprayer, as I mentioned just a second ago, or you can downsize it by cutting in half for a smaller sprayer. We're just going to stir this thoroughly and then put it into our sprayer and head out to the garden and spray a little patch where I noticed there were some chewing insects. And the reason this works really well for those type of insects is the cayenne pepper and the garlic really repels them away. Also, if you're having the mosquito issue in the garden, the garlic will help repel them, as well as the soap. It can kill the small larvae that may be hiding in different areas. Now one thing to remember, if you want this to mix properly when you first put it together, use warm to hot water. You don't want to use scalding water, but a little bit warmer water is going to mix all those dry ingredients a lot better. You still will probably need to agitate it as you're going around the garden, and focus on doing that as you go around, because it will separate over time. The storage life on this is very limited, so I would use it, make just enough that you can use it right away and spray the area you need to spray. So speaking about this particular formula, the reason this works so well is that biting and chewing insects, and the ones that are going to be attacking your plants, the garlic and the cayenne pepper are going to act as a repellent. There's some strong sulfur compounds in the garlic, and the heat of the powder here is going to repel them as well. The soap is going to help it adhere to the leaves or whatever stems you got going there, and then also the baking soda alters the pH slightly, and it also acts as something that will kill the insect from the inside if they consume it or it gets into their digestive system. So this next one is a liquid spray. It's great for aphids, whitefly, and spider mites, and you find those both in the ornamental garden and the vegetable garden. Now this recipe is great to do with warm or slightly hot water. You're going to do 1 tablespoon of the baking soda. You're going to use half a tablespoon of the Castile soap. And next we're going to use half a tablespoon of essential peppermint oil. I always have this around the greenhouse because there's so many uses for it. So half. We want to make sure that the water again is on the warm side and we can mix it very easily, and we'll need to agitate this as we walk around spraying the garden out of our sprayer. So just give your sprayer a couple of shakes as you treat each plant directly on the leaves, undersides, and at the ground level. So we've got it mixed in our sprayer, and the way this particular recipe works is that the Castile soap again breaks that protective barrier on the insect's body. The baking soda gets into their body, irritates them, and if it's ingested, it's going to kill them that way even faster. The peppermint acts as a repellent for any future insects. So this is one of the simplest, and it's also very effective for a variety of insects. But I do this maybe once a month as just an overall spray. I'll either do a spot treatment on a particular plant, or if I'm having a sudden infestation, I'll get the big sprayer out and do an overall spray of the entire garden. And one great thing about this peppermint spray, after you do a treatment on the garden smells so great. It's just a candy peppermint smell, so I think you'll like it if you like the smell of peppermint. Now, if you don't have access to Castile soap, or you don't want to order it and you want to try something you have around the house, you can try vegetable oil as well, and that will help with coating the insect and coating the leaves. So you can replace the Castile soap if you don't want to order it. But again, everything I'm using, I'm putting links in the description for you. So guys, I'm trying to make even more content now, and I'm trying to make the best content I can. I've added a Patreon link to the description. So if you're interested in content that may never end up on YouTube, or it's an early release content, take a look at the Patreon, and I'm going to be adding stuff there maybe twice a week, 3 times a week as I can. I'm going to keep trying to add as many videos as I can to the main YouTube channel, but again, there'll be content there that may be a little bit off topic. The gardening, I may go into other topics as well. So I do that sometimes. I go into whatever interests me at that time. So if you have a question about this video or any previous video, I hope you'll become a public subscriber first, because I tend to put those comments and questions to the very front of the line. I get anywhere from 100 to 300 comments a day, and it's hard to answer anybody. So if you have something you want answered, please become the public subscriber first. That's the way I filter everything, and then I'll answer your question as accurately and as honestly as I can. So guys, I really appreciate you watching. It's getting hot in the greenhouse, so I'm getting out of here before it gets much hotter. Have a great day.